Do you think that we could start with you telling us a little bit about the workshop and how it kind of operates, size, curriculum, that kind of stuff?
Hi, Sidney.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. And hi, Michelle.
Hi.
My creative writing classes, the workshop-based ones, are about knowing how to be in the presence of other people's work and also in the presence of other people looking at your work. So a lot of it is about learning to have a relationship with the work in front of you, but also being exposed to other people's writing and reflecting on that, as well as editing. So that's in general how I construct the writing classes.
Cool. And Michelle, can you tell me a little bit about how the workshop helped you develop the story that you ended up submitting to the short story prize?
Yeah, so basically the workshop kind of just told me that my story was something that was worth working on, that it was something that I guess had potential, because when I first wrote it, it was kind of a very spontaneous kind of decision to write it, and then like I was also experimenting with a lot of new things that I hadn't tried before, like repetition and symbolism and so on. And like when I wrote it, I honestly thought to myself, this is too simple and too depressing to be worth reading. And so, but then I submitted to workshop anyway because like I wanted to see what people thought, and I was really surprised by the response I received, and that was kind of from the workshop I was able to receive these kinds of first impressions and kind of and these first comments from people, and like and be able to kind of gauge what the reader response to this was. And I think that encouraged me a lot to encourage me in like thinking that this is like something that I can work on, that I can continue to develop further, and it's something that I could continue to improve on. And so being able to receive those comments, those reactions, those kind of the feedback on what worked and what didn't work and what the readers thought about it, it helped me know like the direction of where I wanted to take this piece, and also like it just encouraged me to work on it at all. So that's really appreciated.
Yeah, that's great. And would you say that being involved in the workshop and being involved in the editing process of others' works changed the way that you approach your own work?
For sure, definitely. I think to approach work as like a writer and like an editor is kind of like from similar but also slightly different directions. When it comes to when it comes to your own work, like you reread your own work like a million times. You read it like, and it kind of like becomes ingrained in your brain. And so because of that, like you can be, firstly, I think extra critical of yourself, but also you could kind of overlook some like things that you wouldn't necessarily notice if you like had a fresh perspective. And so I found that was the case with the piece I wrote, Moribund, and also with any other piece I workshopped, was just being able to get that outside perspective, that kind of fresh pair of eyes, is very helpful for sure, because it like shows you what you're overlooking. It shows you things that you might not have considered yourself. It shows you potentially new ways of like taking the piece in like new directions. Like it also shows you again, like, because everyone's going to have a different reaction, I think, and interpretation of your work, and being able to hear that from other people is extremely valuable experience. And then similarly with editing other people's works, when you're editing other people's works, like you want to read carefully, of course, because you want to like honor the work that they have shared with you, and you want to kind of consider things as well, like what is the author trying to say? How are they saying it? Are they effective in the way that they are saying it? And like these kinds of questions that you ask yourself, and also like how can you also as an editor help the author say what they are saying? And like after you kind of go through that process a lot of times with other people's work, I think you start kind of applying it to your own work as well. So you're asking yourself those questions as well. What am I trying to say? How am I trying to say it? Am I effective in saying it? And then so I feel like being able to approach your own work with that kind of workshopping mindset, I think also it helps a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just want to add that it also it also gets clarified when you're able to answer, what is this piece about? And if you hear other people telling you what they think your piece is about, it helps you to know whether or not you're on the right track compared to what you think it's about, right?
Definitely, for sure. Because I remember one question you asked me during when we were working on the piece, because you asked me what are you trying to say with this piece, and then that really stuck with me. And so that was kind of a question that I was focusing on as I was doing my revisions as well. So I really appreciated it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I suppose too that it might also, you might be able to learn more about the direction that you were going, even just based on feedback that other people will give you too. You may not have seen it going in a specific way, but once you hear back from other people, you're like, oh, maybe that is where it was going. Yeah, cool. Yeah. Juliane, how would you go about nurturing a student's work that you feel has publication potential within the context of the workshop?
Well, I should start by saying that all student work has publication potential, but that depends on the time and the energy that the student has to work on it. And so, what was the question again?
How do you
go about
nurturing it?
Nurturing.
Yeah.
So, first, I don't see myself as any kind of nurturer, but I am a cheerleader, and I like to see people work with their own work. And so, and I'm not thinking about cheerleading in the, rah, rah, let's go, but I'm thinking of encouraging the person to be able to be in relation to their work and see where it can go. And so a lot of my work is about witnessing people coming to their own voice. And I think that students quite often come with the idea of a story, but they don't know how to relate to it, right? So sometimes the story came to them, or sometimes they would like to write like somebody, but I think it becomes much more sharper when they discover their own voice and then use it to tell the story. So then it's about, I think, guiding a student towards their own voice. That's what I would say.
That sounds really nice. Yeah, and definitely, cheerleading for sure.
Yeah, and so it becomes really an affirming job to have, to see people coming to themselves, and then once someone finds their voice or is on the track to finding their voice, they become much more confident about what they're doing, and then writing is not as scary as it could be because they have a relation to the text, which is not them, right? But is a tool to say what they want to say.
Yeah. Absolutely. Michelle, how long did you spend on the story from the inception to the sending it off to CBC?
So I think I read the first draft of it in March 2021. And I was actually lucky because I was able to kind of put this piece through 2 workshops, because I first wrote it in Carolyn Smart's creative writing 496 class, and that was the first draft of it. And I was able to get to workshop it then with my classmates then, and receive their first reactions and kind of what they thought of the piece, of what changes and improvements they thought I could make. And then I was able to take that and then over the summer kind of just continue working on this piece, and also being able to give myself some space from the piece as well, and kind of return to it after some time, and then from a kind of a fresher perspective, and then be able to continue working on it. And then I entered Juliane's class, and then that was also again very helpful because I had this new version of this piece, and then I could put it through workshop again, and then receive reactions from an entirely new audience, and then it's really interesting too because 2 different workshops, you can get really different responses from both, and I found that super helpful because this new workshop also helped me realize things about the piece that I hadn't noticed before, and that again helped me with continuing to revise this piece and work on it. And then of course I worked with Juliane as well with the piece itself, and then that was also again very helpful in figuring out which things I needed to tweak, what things worked, what things didn't, what works with different people, and so on. And then by the time I submitted it, I think it was around February 2022-ish. Yeah. So it took me about a year of working on it. But even today, when I reread the piece, I find things that I would like to change or improve on. So I think in that sense, writing is kind of a very continual process.
Yeah, it's hard to let go of things. Yeah, absolutely. And did you end up working with Michelle on the piece throughout that process, or once it was out of your workshop, did you kind of let it go as well?
I don't know that. this is true for all good stories. They don't leave you, right? So even if you're not working on them, you still continue to think about them. And I know that I've thought about your piece, Michelle, whenever someone comes and says, I'd like to write about this piece, but I also want to write about this, and I think, why don't you bring all of them together, right? So who you are is as important as the story you're telling. This, and that's very clear in Moribund, right? But it was about getting it to that point. Absolutely, I continue to think about it afterwards.
Juliane's comments and like feedback definitely sat with me as I was continuing to revise the piece. So yeah, I really appreciate this.
You're welcome. I was looking at it this morning too.
No.
Because I thought to myself, I better know this story all over again. So I searched for it and I found it, and I was glad to have found it, because often I like to have my student work remain on cue, right? I tell students, don't email me your work, but I did receive it, and they sent it to me in an email, and I was glad for that, right? So then I could look at it again and remember. And you know, when you're in presence of a good story, every time you read it, you're reading it afresh, right? Even if you've read it many times. So I was relieved for that. I was happy for that.
That's great. And you said that I know previously the program asked students to submit a portfolio, and you have mentioned that that might not be the case anymore. Are you willing to speak a little bit to that?
Sure. The portfolio system is usually, I think it's designed to weed out people who are not serious about writing. So if you're going to register for a course, a writing course, you should have been writing before. You should have something to show that I'd like to continue to write. So then an instructor doesn't have to worry about students who don't have a writing practice. So that's one way to gauge that. The other way to gauge it through a portfolio system is to think about the quality of writing. So for instance, you might be able to say, this is a first year writing, this is a grad level writing, and send students in different directions, right? But if you're also thinking about students who want to come to learn to write, I would say it's unfair to weed them out because they don't have a writing practice yet, because they might pick up a writing practice from being in a class. Maybe they didn't have an opportunity before. So the portfolio system works well for people who have a writing practice already, but it doesn't do very much for those who might be a good writer, might have the discipline and the interest to work, but don't have a writing practice yet. Right?
Yeah.
So that's how I think about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely, yeah. And I'm wondering if both of you could maybe speak to if you have any advice for writers who are interested in taking the class but who are nervous about sharing their work. What would you maybe say to them?
Well, I've been to, I think, many workshops over the years, and I think sharing your writing is always a bit of a nerve-wracking process, even though I've done it since I was in high school. It's still always a little bit oh my gosh, people are going to read my writing and they're going to judge it. It's not about judging. It's a workshop is about sharing your work, about kind of getting ideas on how you can make this work better, on how being able to gauge people's reactions, emotional reactions, and kind of technical reactions to it as well. And it's about helping you in the end. Workshop is at its core about support, about encouraging feedback, and about helping you elevate your story and your piece and your craft to kind of higher heights. And so in that sense, I think workshopping can be scary for sure, but I think it is a very rewarding process. And not only that, I feel also when you workshop, you are able to be in a group of like-minded people, I think, who also are really interested in writing, and I feel writing can sometimes, at least for me, be a little bit of a lonely process. So I feel it's really nice, a really nice feeling to be able to be in a group of writers, of people who enjoy writing like you do, and to be able to kind of share your writing with them and discuss writing with them and writing techniques with them and everything. And then even when the course ends, you have this kind of community that you've created, and you can even potentially continue sharing your writing with them after the course ends. And so I think that's just a really great thing.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I would add that writing workshops are the way I designed them anyway is to sort of replicate the real life, working life of a writer. Oh my God, of a writer, which is to say that in the community, the way I understand it, writers write by themselves, but they also write in community. So quite often there's people who get together and they workshop each other's work and they give each other feedback and they support each other through the process. So even if in the end, when the work is published, only your name appears, there's often an acknowledgements page to show that there were other people who were involved in this. So workshopping is a real life experience, right? But to agree with you, Michelle, it's nerve-wracking to share your work. Recently, I had to send my work to somebody who I really admire, whose work I've read and has inspired me. And I felt that feeling of, oh my God, she's going to judge me again, right? And then I had to talk myself down and tell myself, it's not me, it's so workshopping helps me to know that it's not me who's being judged, and it's the work in the presence of somebody else, another reader, and a caring reader, who will look at it and say, oh, I like this, or I maybe not like, but this is the questions I have about it. This is what I'm curious about. This is what I'd like to see more. And so workshopping is an opportunity to have your work have first readership and an honest, caring readership. If you have a good workshop, that help you then to continue to write on your own. So for someone who's afraid to say, no, you'll be in company, you'll be in good company.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's designed well, you'll be all right and your work will get better.
It's very, yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely seems like a very nerve-wracking process, but it seems very rewarding, for sure. And another question for you both. Would you be able to speak a little bit to the process of submitting works to publications and to contests such as the CBC Short Fiction Prize?
Yeah, so competitions, writing competitions are, it's an interesting process. When I was a kid, I also would submit to the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and so that was set in the U.S., but they allowed Canadian applicants, and like that was also very, I think a process that kind of prepared me for the CBC Nonfiction Prize, because I kind of understood like what to expect, and basically looking for creative writing contests and like literary prizes. I found it. I personally like to do it because I find that having a deadline and kind of is kind of like an exterior motivator for me to like be able to actually submit work, to actually work on my writing, and to like be more proactive in it. And so the CBC Nonfiction Prize, having that deadline in my head, which was like February 2022, it kind of helped me. It like gave me a goal to work towards, and so I found that very helpful. And then then you submit it, and like I think with the prize as well, or with submitting to any kind of literary prize, I find it like it's a good opportunity to get published for sure, to potentially kind of get your work out there, to like be able to potentially even make connections. I've never submitted to like a literary magazine or anything yet before. I am currently like looking around, but like I'm not familiar with that process myself. But I do think that a creative writing competition, if you're interested in that kind of thing, is a good way of potentially getting your work out there and like being able to receive some recognition as well. And so yeah.
Thanks for that. I'm glad you sent that book out, and I'm glad it got the recognition that it did, because it's often one thing to tell a student that their work is really good or give them a good grade, and then to find that other people might think that way, and then the work is read nationally is feels good too, right? But I'd say that writing competitions, as you've said, a good way to get you to work towards a deadline, but it in itself is not the measure of your work, right? And so it can be nerve-wracking, it can be heartbreaking, because that should have won the whole prize. It should have. If there was fairness in the world, it should have. But I think that it's also fair to say that now that Moribund is there, it is a beginning of something else, right? Like I like to tell students at the end of the term, your work is probably now at the beginning of where it could go, right? So to know that things can keep working, you can keep working, keep polishing your work. I remember the story of Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah and how it had 80 different versions, right? Kept polishing that work. But I want to add something about literary magazines. They're also a really good way to get your work out in the world. And I would encourage people who are writers to look and see what literary magazines are publishing and find a place where their work can find a home. Because then you can use it to say, I have been published in XYZ. And we used to have a magazine here called The Lake Effect. It's a good place for many people who got their work published, including our last writing resident, Omar El-Akkad. He always talks about getting his work published in The Lake Effect, right? So to have your work also in community with other writers beyond the classroom is a good way to find a home for your work, the work that you worked in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a really good point about like the idea that literary prizes, they do not define your worth as a writer. They do not define the quality of your work for sure. Like it's like at the end of the day, you know, you have judges are all like looking for their own things, and like sometimes literary prizes are looking for like their own things, and like I think honestly, it's not a measure of your work. I personally like to use literary prizes as like a deadline for myself, but they don't define your worth, and like even if you don't win or like don't receive recognition, that's okay. At least you submitted your work, and that in itself is a very, I think, admirable thing, because it's a really tricky thing to put your work out in the world and to have it be read by other people. And just the act of doing that is, I think, very brave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it I guess takes away the sting too, because I know that rejection is also a part of the writing process. So the braver you are about putting your stuff out there, the easier it gets to kind of take yourself out of the take your I guess not take it personally. Yeah.
Some literary magazines will send you a rejection slip along with editorial notes. And so sometimes someone might say, that's a good way to get my work workshopped by professional editors. Yeah. I do want to end by saying I'm so proud of that story. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
Thank you for working on it.
Thank you. Yeah. Moribund would not have existed at all without your help, without the help of all my classmates and like so many of my other mentors. So like it was truly a very collaborative process, and I'm extremely so grateful that I was able to work with so many fantastic people on this piece, and just I'm really appreciative. So yeah, thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that we have a journal for graduate students to submit creative works to. It's called The Lamp. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the undergrad version of that. I know there's one called The Quilt, I believe.
Quilt, yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Quilt is this wonderful literary magazine here at Queen's that is for undergraduate writing. And it accepts both academic as well as creative work, and it publishes both. And it's a very wonderful publication staffed by incredible people who are all very, dedicated to English literature, to writing as a craft, and it's wonderful. So I would absolutely really encourage everybody to submit to Quilt, because it is such a wonderful publication. You will get the chance to work with writers and editors that really respect your piece and want to showcase its true potential to everybody. And so Quilt, wonderful. Please check us out.